we have a partnership with the Michigan Forest Association. They are the primary lead on this project, and our role is to provide support for conservation districts and training and education on how to better reach underserved landowners. And so a lot of the educational components and things that we're working on for conservation districts in that training arena are covered through our grant with MFA for the Forest and Water Fund. But we also want to make sure the conservation districts know how landowners in your county can get access to these funds and to getting more conservation practices on the ground on forested lands. So I will hand it over to you, Vic, and anybody, if you want to either hold your comments till the end or throw them in the chat, and then we will go ahead and make sure we get all your questions answered before the end today.
Thanks, Rivka. I appreciate the introduction and also partnering with you on the project as well. So I'm gonna go over this. It should take about, I don't know, maybe a half an hour, 35 minutes or so, and then we should have some time for questions at the end. Just wanted to start out by saying that this project, the Forest and Water Fund, it's a partnership with the Michigan Association of Conservation Districts, the Michigan Forest Association, also the DNR Forest Stewardship Program, and it's funded by the USDA Forest Service. So that's all up there on the introductory slide. And then today in our agenda, we're going to do a really quick introduction, and then we're going to talk about what the Forest and Water Fund is, as well as the covered practices, and then how people participate in the cost share, and also who is eligible for that. And then we'll go over the application process, and then I want to talk with you all about how you can help us to implement the program, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So what is the Michigan Forest and Water Fund? Well, it's funded by USDA Forest Service. That's an IRA grant, and it's the FLS program through the Forest through the Forest Service. It provides cost share funding for private landowners to do good stewardship work on their land, particularly projects that mitigate and adapt to climate change, increase resilience through good forestry work. It has an emphasis on co-benefits, so particularly water quality, wildlife habitat, things like that. But ecosystem services is a consideration also with this program, and something that we're keenly looking at, partly because we want to continue the funding into the future, and that's where the funding will come from, is from those ecosystem services that are provided by forest stewardship work. This is a combination of two grants from the Forest Service for a total of $6.4 million for the cost share program. It was a total of $8 million. 6.4 is available for landowner cost share. The grant period ends in December of 2029, and we anticipate having 90% of the money contracted by May of 2028. And that's really important because we need to have time for people to complete the practices and for us to wrap up payments in order to report back at the end of 2029. And reimbursement payments can be up to $25,000. So any landowner can get up to $25,000, and that will cover material supplies, consultants, contractors, any necessary plans, and some landowner labor. And I'll introduce real quickly the Forest and Water Fund team. All three of us are staff at the Michigan Forest Association. I'm the project manager. I come from a background of wildlife biology, and I've worked with land conservancies for most of my career, working at the Little Traverse Conservancy and also the Grand Traverse Conservancy for a combination of about 24 years, and then started here last July. Nicole Doyle, who may be on the call, is our executive director for the Michigan Forest Association, and Melissa Franquist is the grant accountant. She's the one who will be making the payments to the landowners and helping to keep track of all of our grant information. So now I'll just get into the cost share practices, and I really love this photo. This photo was sent to me this spring for one of the projects that we funded. It was a prescribed fire in an oak woodland, and you can see the morel mushroom there in foreground as it's burning slowly in the background. Kind of a cool representation of a spring burn. So prescribed fire is one that's getting a lot of interest across the state, particularly in southern areas. The purpose of the practice is to use it as a tool to maintain and restore fire adapted systems and also to prevent catastrophic fire. So there's a few different ways that fire could be used. It is best done, or I guess some of the examples that I can give you would be an oak savanna, as a burn or as site preparation for other restoration activities. Some folks are looking at it as an invasive species removal tool, so you can use it for any of those things. And we're looking for creative solutions as well, but it has to be a forested habitat. That's one of the keys here, is that a pollinator habitat won't work, grasslands won't work, but if you're doing an oak pine barren, oak savanna, anything like that, we can burn those as well. So it's a pretty cool practice, and if you have any questions about that one, we'll have time at the end too. Another practice is the ecological tree planting. And this one, of course, makes sense from a climate mitigation perspective, because we're, planting trees, which grow and sequester carbon. But also it can have secondary purposes of protecting water quality when done near riparian areas. So the purpose of this practice is to increase species diversity, to improve forest resilience, and increase carbon sequestration to mitigate climate change. Examples of this would be maybe underplanting in an existing forest to increase underrepresented species. You could maybe do this as an assisted species migration project, something like where maybe you want to convert a field to a forested habitat, and it can be used for creation or restoration of a forested habitat. But again, the goal has to be a forested habitat. We can include also trees, shrubs, or other representative species that are associated with the habitat goals you have for your forested habitat. So that can be kind of a cool thing that we can do plantings for. In an oak savanna, we can do the tree plantings, but also help you with some of the seeding for the grasses and wildflowers, and even some shrubs that may be associated with those habitats. Forest resilience treatments. Now, this one is a catch-all for pretty much anything that you do in an existing forest that will help to increase diversity, species diversity, structural diversity, and improve resilience to climate change. Ideally, it's reducing the threats of stressors within the forest. Also, so examples of these could be things like pre-commercial thinnings. Ideally, we wouldn't be looking necessarily at a red pine thinning, but if you had a hardwood stand of some sort and you wanted to go through and do a thinning that was non-merchantable, we could help you to afford to be able to do that practice. Creating canopy openings, maybe where the scale of the project is too small to get a commercial operation in there, or the ground is too sensitive for a traditional logging operation. We can help you to create canopy gaps. Then we can pair that up also with tree planting, for example. We can do deer exclusion, and there are no real parameters on that, but for deer exclusion, it should be, sort of cost effective. We don't want to spend an entire $25,000 excluding deer, but when done in coordination with tree planting or a burn or other practices, it could make a lot of sense. We can do treatments for non-native or invasive plants and pests. What we want to look for with those is that we're doing those in combination with other practices. We don't want to become the funder for invasive species work. There's a lot of folks already doing that, infrastructure in place, and we could spend a lot of money doing invasive species work. But we can include that with a proposal that has other, climate adaptive practices. So, include tree planting with that, or prescribed fire, or some other kind of forest resilience treatments, and we'd be happy to help fund invasive plants or other pests. In fact, we have contracts now for invasive species removal, and also we did an oak wilt treatment this spring on a property in Benzie County. Now, the high carbon reserve is a very interesting and unusual practice. This is, some might think of this as, a carbon project, but it's not. It's very different than a carbon project. Essentially, what we're doing here is we're paying landowners to adapt their practices. So, they may have an area that they could harvest, but they'd really rather not, or maybe they understand that there's other values there for wildlife or maybe more mature forest habitat. Perhaps it buffers the wetlands, and bringing equipment in there might cause some sedimentation or other problems. In those cases where there's steep slopes or riparian zones or old growth characteristics, we can set aside land, and an entire $25,000 could be done for this if you have enough land. $200 to $250 per acre payment. And this is the one piece of the program that isn't a reimbursement. This is just a payment for changing the practices in that habitat. So the requirement here is that it has to have a conservation easement, and that the conservation easement may have some restrictions in it, but whatever you do to protect a high carbon reserve needs to be in addition to the conservation easement. So, the landowners who have conservation easements that you work with, that the conservation districts work with, would be a great partner for this one. The nice thing about this is it's a fairly simple and easy cost share practice. We provide the payment to them, and then that payment could be used in any number of ways for other activities that they want to do, such as invasive species or tree plantings or other things. But they have a unique ability to apply for this. And so, for example, if they were to set aside 100 acres of riparian forested buffer, and it wasn't restricted already by the conservation easement, and they were an underserved landowner, they could get $25,000 for designating that 100 acres. There is no acreage minimum. I could see someone doing this on 5 acres or 10 acres. I also see that this could pair very well with the protections that the conservancies are doing to expand on those, or in the case of like the old growth network, where maybe landowners can designate an area for old growth, and we can pay for those change in practices. So here are some of the examples: stands with old growth characteristics, mature cedar swamps, mature stands on steep slopes, and forested riparian buffers. Those would be the areas we'd be looking at. But again, like with all these practices, we're looking for creative, innovative solutions. So any ideas we haven't come up with here, propose them. We may or may not be able to fund it. So who can apply? And it's quite a few people. So basically any non-industrial private forest landowner that owns less than 2,500 acres of forest land in Michigan. So this includes family forest landowners. That's the bulk of the people who have been showing interest in the program. Also local schools. So if your local school has a school forest that they own as a local municipality, then not necessarily, won't work if it's federal land that they're using as a school forest. But anytime that the local school owns land and has it as a school forest, or has a project they'd like to do on land, they can apply as well. Other local units of government, so your cities, townships, et cetera, could apply. Tribes, tribal governments, as well as tribal members can apply for this. Nonprofit organizations are great partners because they often have land that they can make available to the public for demonstration. And the same goes for colleges and universities. They all can apply to this program. Now here's where some of the details get a little confusing. So I'll try to go through this, and I may have some questions on this. But projects can be up to $25,000 per landowner. And as you know, landowners can have some wild and crazy structures to their ownership. So there can be multiple owners. There can be people that are part owners on several properties. any one landowner can have up to $25,000 for all of the properties that they're involved in. And so you can apply for one property or multiple properties, but only $25,000 per landowner. Um, those project costs can include, again, professional project management. So this one's really important. I want that foresters or ecologists who are helping these landowners, that they get paid for their time and that they don't feel like this is something extra that they have to do to support this program. They can write those right into the grant proposal, into their project proposal for the cost share funding when they submit their application. Also can include materials, supplies, and contract labor. So, and again, we want reasonable costs. I like to think that we could keep, our planning costs, our project management costs, those kinds of things to around 30% of the total project. And some of these projects are very small. The properties might only be 5 or 10 acres. And so sometimes the planning and project management oversight can be significant, but it should be reasonable and we can cover all of those things. Also, I include in there the opportunity for landowners to get paid at the federal volunteer rate of $35 an hour for up to $1,500. So if, for example, they did a tree planting project, they would be able to document their labor and then submit that along with photos and verification of their work, and then also get paid for their time on the project. So the rates that are available, anyone who qualifies as a non-industrial private forest landowner, less than 2,500 acres of forest, will receive at a minimum 80% cost share. Or in the case of the high carbon reserve, 80% would be $200 per acre. So if you are an underserved landowner, you'd receive 100%. And if you're in the priority watersheds related to the forest to my faucet, you'd get 90%. And if anybody has questions on where those are, there are some maps available I can share. So underserved landowners, this is where I really want to emphasize with conservation districts, we need help here in reaching these landowners and connecting them to our projects. Not only do 40% of our money needs to be spent on underserved landowners so that we didn't have to provide a match to these grant funds. But we also want to make sure that these underserved landowners are being engaged and that the forests that have maybe been historically undermanaged or had poor access to foresters or resource professionals, that they can not only get the money from this grant program, but also access to professionals to help them manage their lands. So underserved landowners include veterans or active military, anyone who's owned and managed forest land for less than 10 years, and then tribes and tribal landowners also are covered 100%. Impoverished communities, so those would be communities, and I think there's 5 counties. If you suspect you're in one of those, I can help you with those. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but they're basically counties where the poverty level is above 20%. And then low income landowners. So there's some requirements there for maximum income levels. So for example, I think it was, for a family of 4, there's a number. For an individual or for a married couple, there's a number. And if you make less than those requirements, you're considered to be a low income landowner and will receive 100% as well. And those numbers are fairly low. And we also know that many forest landowners are land rich and cash poor, and increasingly more so, people who are low income are unable to buy forest land. So, but there will be some of those out there, and we can work with them to get these paid for. In fact, I'm working on a program component right now where we may be able to get funding, short-term loans for these landowners. So that they can, have money up front to do the practices, so that some of these underserved landowners can have better access to this program. That way, when they get reimbursed, they're just paying back on a loan, but they don't have to wait until they have cash flow to be able to do the practices. So I think I've covered this slide well enough. 100% for underserved, 90% for priority watersheds, and 80% for all others. So how do landowners apply? And we're constantly evolving this program and this project. So this could change as we move forward and we improve our information available and the processes and streamline everything. It's a brand new cost share program, so we're learning as we go. But the first thing a landowner should do is visit our website. And I apologize that that blue kind of washes out a little bit against the green, but that is www.forestandwaterfund.org. And we have information up on that website. We're also updating it as often as we get new information. In fact, I think maybe by the end of this week, there'll be some more information up there about each of the practices and some of the specifications that I'm providing to help landowners and professionals be able to submit applications and understand what we're looking for. Next, the landowner, after they visit our website, they should coordinate with professionals and develop a feasible project concept. You know, if a landowner has an idea, they really need to be talking to a professional to make sure that it'll work, that it's practical, feasible, and that it fits our goals, but also that it's appropriate for their land. Then they can sign up on our website with a pre-application, and that part may change here shortly. But for now, they go to our website, they can learn the information there, and then they can pre-apply online. Hopefully, they have a good developed concept with their consultant, and then they work with their consultants and contractors to describe and estimate the cost of the project. And once they have a good idea of what that is, they can fill out the full application, and we can work to prioritize those, get them under contract, and allocate an amount of money that will be adequate for their project. So that's the basic process there for how landowners apply. And then, you know, we're often writing those contracts for a couple of years so that people have time to implement their practices. At the end of the grant period, you know, again, this ends in December of 2029. Our contracts will become shorter, and we plan to have some money that's not used from contracts that will become available again at the end of 2028 or early 2029, and we would love to be able to spend every penny. So we'll be continuing to issue contracts that last year so that landowners can use up some of those funds, and those might be best used for projects that can be done within a season or two, like tree planting or prescribed fire, possibly something where they don't need a lot of time to implement those. So how can the conservation districts support our landowners? Again, the key for us is that you can help us to identify and connect with underserved landowners. They're out there. We don't know who all of them are, but you know, there's quite a few folks that we need to connect with. The tribal governments especially are ones that have been an untapped resource for potential projects and partners. The tribes and then the tribal landowners as well. So I hope that we'll be able to reach out to them, veterans and active military folks. So if you can help find those people, that'll be useful. And if you're a conservation district forester or a staff member and you're in one of the 5 counties, and I'll provide that information as a follow-up here, and maybe Rivka can distribute that. That would be helpful as well. So, you know, remind them they get 100% cost share. There are some limitations on some things, but for the most part, they'll get 100% of what they put into it. And again, those are the lists of who those underserved landowners are. And then if you come across landowners and they're interested in the program, or you share the program with landowners in general, help to identify projects and help them to connect with professionals to help them to assist them with developing the concept for the program application, and then also for you know, someone to help them to implement it. And I know a lot of foresters out there who might be the most experienced, you know, are also very busy doing timber sales and other things, or seasonally busy, you know, with marking timber, whatever it may be. But any type of natural resource professional can assist these landowners, whether it's a wildlife biologist, an ecologist, anyone who has a professional degree or experience. We can work with these landowners to make these projects happen. So that's important. And if you can help to connect those landowners with people in your community who can do that work, that would be helpful. So that's it for my presentation. I am happy to take any questions that you have on any of the sections, and I can scroll back through and look at slides if you have questions about particular slides. Thank you.
Yes, so Melissa, I don't know if Vic answered your question after you asked it about who is writing conservation plans and submitting the application, or if you still, do you have more questions about that?
Well, Rivka, I asked the question before he started talking about it, but it seems like that could be all over the board as what he's given us. And I was really going for, did we have to have a forester on staff in order to be able to put this plans together? But it sounds like to me now that I've heard the whole thing that potentially the landowner is going to want to be working with somebody before they actually submit an application.
Yes,
Um,
that's
Yes.
correct.
yeah, yeah. And so
Y-
I think I think we're going to need to know as conservation district staff, even to point people in this direction to be understand a little bit more about what it all entails. Because, if we're working with people already, which I got a half a dozen people in mind as we're talking through this, I need to understand the program a little bit better myself to even be able to articulate what the benefits are to them. So any
So
more
the
information that we could
materials
have
we're
with
going to
that.
be, yeah, the materials we're going to be sending out after this, Melissa, we'll send a copy of the recording of this meeting. We also have a flyer that is a printable PDF that you can print out and have available at your district that talks about who who can apply and what the practices are and what the application process is. So those flyers will all be provided to you, as well as information about the practice standards, and the full application so that you guys can
Yeah.
all see
Okay.
what is included on the application, and if um, individuals have questions or whatever, that you can help point them in the right direction. So we'll be sending out all of that information as a follow-up to this, so you kind of have a little toolkit, more or less,
Sure.
and be able to share that. And so, Steve, as far as your question, can someone come into the district to provide this presentation? I think number one, feel free to distribute the recording of this meeting widely to whoever you think it is applicable to. There will be a presentation at the fall conference about this as well in October. And I won't speak for Vic, but subject to his availability or other MFA staff, I know that that is something that they have done, is go to individual districts to present information about it too. So if that is of interest, I would just say reach out to Vic, and the MFA team can kind of determine who is geographically close and or has time availability, and work on that. Um, Dana asked, do you have connections with VA hospitals who sometimes have more programs than just hospital visits within their buildings? I don't know if we've done any outreach to VA hospitals, but that's a good idea for a place to distribute resources and information. Danny asks, if the conservation district owns land as a unit of government, would they be eligible? I believe the answer is yes, but Vic, I think you know more about what's eligible and not eligible entities.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember what I learned a while back about how conservation districts are formed, and they're sort of quasi-governmental, right? So they're like, are they sort of a branch of the county government in a way?
No, we're considered special purpose units of state government is the
Okay.
technical term.
So I
So it's
think,
not state, it's
mhm.
not county. The other entities that are under that same classification are things like fire departments, like our special
Okay.
purpose units of state government.
Okay. So I think in that case, I'll just have to double check that state entities are eligible. I know federal is not, and I suspect state is not because it basically said local units of government. But that was the federal government's information that I was using. So maybe they consider state to be local governments, but
Well, state, it is
yeah,
not state. And so that's a really important clarification. Like, even though we are regulated by the state,
yeah.
we're not the state. And here's how we know, because we're not applicable for state health insurance benefits for our employees. So
Hmm.
it would specifically be about local government. So I
Okay,
guess the answer to your question, Danny, is Vic will look into the grant language and probably
I
I would
will.
Melissa. Melissa probably is the person to answer that,
Yeah,
as the keeper of all the grant knowledge. And she'll be able to get that answer to you.
yeah. I'll check into that and I'll get back with you all.
Okay, Brooke asked if we have landowners that have USDA NRCS cost share assistance for tree or shrub plantings, could Forest and Water Fund cover tree tubes to protect them from deer browse if it's not included in the USDA contract?
This is a great question, and that's almost like you were planted in the audience. So yes, the answer is yes. The limitation that we have is that we can't pay for the same practice on the same piece of land, but we can do compatible activities to the practice. So, for example, if you're doing tree planting on a particular acreage, we can't do tree planting on that same acreage. We can do it on another piece of your property, though. But if you do a tree planting and you don't have deer exclusion, or you don't have tree tubes, you could apply for those. Now, your application on the surface may not look very competitive because of the fact that you're just applying for tree tubes and not tree planting. But as long as those applications are described as having a partnering funding source and leverage for a better project between the two programs, that will help your scoring for the project. And so, what I would suggest though is that people think about creating very robust proposals that include multiple practices when possible, so that they can have a greater impact on their piece of land. Because this is 25,000 and it's spread across the state, it's nice to think that the impact that we're having locally on these pieces of property will be somewhat significant. So I would love to see us partner with other programs. I'm working also to pair up with the Family Forest Carbon Program so that we can make what we're doing with the high carbon reserve and what they're doing with that compatible as well. And so far, it appears as though we're able to do that. But the same thing for any other federal cost share assistance. We can't pay for the same practice on the same piece of land, but we can pay for different practices on the same piece or on a different portion of the property. We can pay for that practice. So I think that makes it pretty compatible with most of the programs out there. And yes,
Uh,
there are plan requirements. I see a question about forest management plans.
mhm.
So yes, I didn't include that in the slideshow just for the amount of detail that it would require. But yes, and I'm going to be creating a sheet for that I can provide out to conservation districts as well. That will be about the planning requirements for each practice. But every practice has some sort of a planning requirement. So, for example, tree planting doesn't require you to have a forest management plan because you may not have a forest yet, but it does require that you have a tree planting plan. Prescribed fire does not require you to have a forest management plan, but if you do prescribed fire, you need to have a burn plan that's prepared by a professional burn boss. If you are doing forest resilience treatments, you need to have a forest management plan. If you already have one and it just needs to be updated, we can cost share for an addendum. And all of these planning requirements can be paid for and included in the application proposal, and can be funded with cost share. So this is a nice opportunity for landowners to get a plan. All they have to do is do a forest resilience treatment, and they can, get up to $2,500 for 40 acres or greater, or $1,500 for 40 acres or less towards a forest management plan. Um, And that's nice. So in some cases, people will need to have both a forest management plan created for 25 up to $2,500, as well as a tree planting plan and a prescribed fire plan. The high carbon reserve program also requires a forest management plan is in place, and that forest management plan prescribes for the stands being designated as high carbon reserve, that it prescribes activities and harvests in there that are associated
Hey,
with maintaining the carbon reserves that are there, or continuing to store additional carbon. So that can be variable depending on the site, the forest, and also the specifications that are recommended by the foresters.
Melissa asked a follow-up question. Does the forest management plan need to be written by a TSP?
It does not. So, in fact, there is some flexibility within our program that the forest management plan can be written by anyone that has and can justify their professional background. So, a forest management plan can be a property level management plan that includes forestry components. In the case of a project where maybe a harvest is not intended, an ecologist could write it. A wildlife management professional could write this property management plan in order to cover the requirement for a forest management plan, depending on what the practices are, the requirements are, and then also the experience and educational background of the professional. In fact, I'm working with MSU right now to see if we can't have some of their undergraduates working directly with, or graduate students working directly with professional foresters in the field to help with some of these projects to increase the capacity during the term of our grant, to help these foresters have capacity to take on additional work and help landowners apply, and then oversee and implement. And in that case, they don't even have a degree yet, but they're being overseen by, obviously, they're being overseen by, professionals in the field and or professors at the university. And that program's not quite designed yet, but I think that we have a pretty good concept for how that might look. So yeah, there's quite a bit of flexibility, variability. If someone is questioning whether or not their their resource professional is qualified enough, they can chat with me about it, and it really will depend on what we're trying to get out of it. The goal of that is to ensure that the federal money is being spent in a way that is practical and feasible and likely to have success.
Melissa asked, does the USDA underserved eligibility work for this program? That can dive deeper on it, but my understanding is it's a little bit different definitions on what USDA underserved eligibility covers and what this program eligibility covers. Underserved is really those categories that Vic mentioned at the beginning. I'll let you run through them again. So there's a lot of overlap, but they are a little bit different. Vic, you want to
Yeah.
expound on that?
Yeah, so my understanding of it is that the USDA often has used the designation of historically underserved, and the definition of that is slightly different. And I couldn't tell you the nuance of the differences between them, but it's essentially including it. Ours is a subset of that group, and so I can go back through here and talk with you about them. But in a nutshell, it's veterans and active military, tribal governments. Tribal landowners, low income counties, and I should have that list. I don't know why I didn't put that in the slideshow. There are 5 counties in Michigan that qualify, low income landowners, and then I think there was one other one. What am I missing? I can go back to the
Yeah, and
slideshow.
Nicole, while you look that up, Nicole just put in the chat which the high poverty counties are. So
Oh,
those are
thank you.
Isabella, Clare, Mecosta, Lake. I'm gonna say this wrong. Houghton, Houghton. I think Houghton is it, and Wayne County. So anybody in any of those counties, regardless of other qualifications, are considered underserved for the purposes of this grant. So for those of you who are on the call from those counties, put an exclamation point next to Forest and Water Fund for your county.
And then the one that I forgot there was the most obvious one, and the one that most people, I think most of the underserved landowners that we work with, will fall in the category of having owned and managed forest land for less than 10 years. And that's they're new to owning forest land, and they need some additional assistance too. So that's going to be probably a large percentage of the number of landowners who get the 100% cost share will be new forest landowners.
Awesome. Great questions, everybody. Any other questions? And as a reminder, like I said, as you're thinking about that, we will be sending out the recording for this, additional follow-up materials, including the application and a flyer you can hand out at your district to landowners. If you have additional questions you think of after the fact, just feel free to reach out to the MFA team anytime, and they can get you an answer to that question. But any last minute questions for anybody before we've got plenty of time, so don't feel rushed. Melissa says it'll be important for our directors to advocate for this as well. Always, always, I want directors involved and engaged in getting the word out. And there probably are directors who are landowners who would be applicable
Yes.
to apply for these funds as well. So, I know even just on my own board at Ottawa, there's probably at least 2 of our board members who would qualify if they wanted to apply for cost share funds for this program.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, there's no better way to become an advocate for a program than to participate yourself. I know in my working with landowners when I was with the Land Conservancy, that having gone through some of the NRCS programs and cost share, it made it very easy for me to be a liaison and encourage other landowners to participate by explaining it to them from my perspective. So any of the board members or staff of conservation districts who want to participate, feel free to put in your proposal. I'd love to work with you, and then you can help to promote the program.
And yep, Melissa, we will send that out before the end of the week, the flyer and all the follow-up material. Well, thank you so much, Vic, for making the time to be here and share this with everybody. Thanks, Nicole, for jumping on as well and the in-chat support. That's amazing. And we're just excited to be able to share this more broadly with districts throughout the state. And if anybody has follow-up questions, let us know. Thank you again, MFA, for your time and all your work on this program. And I'm sure I'll talk to just about everybody on this call again soon in one way, shape, form, time, or another. So have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Thanks for inviting us. Bye-bye.